I have never seen a glacier in real life. Unlike Abby, I've only seen photos of those long and winding rivers of ice. I have seen what these monstrous masses of compressed ice can do, as over the millennia they've carved and shaped the landscape, leaving behind valleys and river basins and fjords. I've spent a lot of my life living near the Great Lakes, which were created by a massive glacier, which I was delighted to learn was called the Laurentide Ice Sheet. As a kid, we'd vacation at Kelly's Island, one of the islands in Lake Erie left behind by the retreating ice. Kelly's is known for their glacial grooves, which is just as it sounds, immense grooves carved into the soft limestone that contain marine fossils that are 350 million years old. I'm not sure as a kid I really appreciated what I was seeing. It was, after all, grooves in a big rock, and I was far more interested in going swimming in the lake. But every year we'd go and walk through the grooves and marvel at the power of a glacier that had left behind not just grooves in rock, but the largest freshwater lake system in the world, gouging out sediment and depositing it at the edge of its reach, reshaping the mighty Mississippi River and tilling the soil for the fertile Midwest. Now, you might say that's lovely, but why are we talking about glaciers? Glaciers are not in the Bible, and that is true. There is a serious lack of glaciers in the Middle East, where our Holy Scriptures were formed. So, no, you will not find the word glacier in the Bible. But I think we get a good sense of the power and majesty of God's creative force through glaciers in Psalm 104, which we read together. So hear these again. God sets the earth on its foundations so that it shall never be shaken. God covers it with the deep as with a garment. The waters stood above the mountains. And remember, glaciers are frozen water, right? We can imagine this 3,000-foot thick sheet of ice like a garment covering the top and the bottom of the globe. At your rebuke, they flee. At the sound of your thunder, they take to flight. Imagine the power in this glacier forming the earth as it advances and recedes. They rose up to the mountains, ran down to the valleys, to the place that you appointed for them. And then the life that comes forth from this. You make springs gush forth in the valleys. They flow between the hills, giving drink to every wild animal. From your lofty abode, you water the mountains. The earth is satisfied with the fruit of your work. But here's the thing. We humans have not always been satisfied with the fruit of God's work, right? We want more. And because of that, we're learning that these incredibly powerful sheets of ice are also remarkably fragile. Scientists think this Laurentide ice sheet has existed for at least 2.5 million years, just retreating and advancing over the millennia. But now the remnant of this ice sheet, what is left, is expected to completely vanish as an unparalleled rise in heat-trapping greenhouse gases has brought on an alarming rate of melting since the 1960s. And we're seeing the effects of melting glaciers all over the world. Just a few weeks ago, a huge chunk of an alpine glacier broke off and thundered down a mountain in Italy, killing 9. The avalanche was blamed on rising temperatures. And again, the glacier itself is expected to not exist within 25 years. Abby highlighted for us how the Alaskan ecosystem, too, is so very fragile, with not just glaciers melting, but the rivers and the salmon and the bears and the people all interconnected, and one little thing can make the chain break apart. When we talk about creation and the environment, there really is this paradox, right, between this utter permanence and power and extreme fragility. The disciples experienced that in our gospel reading for today, too. We saw that the waters can be so frighteningly powerful, and we can feel so incredibly insubstantial in their midst, but then also we try to exert control over it, and that can lead to disastrous results, as Peter learned. This paradox between strength and fragility continues in Romans. Paul reminds us of creation's fragility as he speaks of the hope that creation itself will be set free from its bondage to decay. All of creation is subject to suffering and death. And so, in the midst of the strength of the ocean and the majesty of the mountains and the solidness of the land, the whole creation has been groaning in labor pains, waiting with eager longing for redemption and restoration. For these next 3 weeks, we'll be called to our theme, Listen to the Voice of Creation. And today, when we pause to listen, we hear the cry as creation is breaking, suffering, dying. We listen to the cry of creation in part because God's salvation is not just for us humans. The kingdom will not be fulfilled until all creation is at peace, until the reconciling work of Christ extends to the relationship of humanity to land and air and water. That same glorious liberty that we await for our own lives is also in store for the land, the sea, plants, animals, even glaciers. And so the fate of creation and the fate of humanity are inseparably bound. As we live here in this place between the already and the not yet of our salvation, we groan together as we await fullness of God's redemption. But we also, if we listen, can hear the cry of hope. Remember, the cry of a mother in labor is not just from pain, but also the eager anticipation of the one who is being birthed. We know and trust that God is at work in this world, bringing forth new life in our midst. Redemption is coming. God is doing that here and now. Wherever we see God transforming the decay around us into new life, we see signs of God's redemption and healing. When we experience life triumphing over death, we see the signs of God at work around us. Every renewal is a sign of the coming redemption. Every time a green sprig sprouts from a decaying stump, God is bringing life out of death, reminding us that brokenness and decay and death do not have the last word. And God invites us to participate with God in the redemption and the healing of the earth. As God's creatures, we are called to see our place in creation, to embrace our fragility, to allow our very vulnerability to help us join together with others, because we know we can't do it alone, to build relationships of solidarity and empathy, like the one that Abby invited us to be a part of with the people of Haines, Alaska. And when we work for healing in fragile places, restoration in broken places, recreation in destroyed places, we just might discover that's where God is. It's easy to look for God in the strong and powerful places, right? Like a ginormous, earth-shaping, 3,000 foot deep, 2.5 million year old sheet of ice, right? That's power. But God is there in the fragile places too. Maybe especially in the fragile places. After all, we've got a God who showed up on earth as a little baby and then was willing to suffer and die on a cross. God shows up in fragile places in solidarity and love and transforms them for the sake of all creation. I may not have seen a glacier, but I've seen what they can do. I may not have seen God face to face, at least, but I've seen what God can do. May we hope even for what we do not see. May we wait for it with patience, and may we join in God's redeeming and healing work for all of God's creation. Amen.